Welcome, Patrick Johnson. Another edition of Canucks This Week playoffs. Canucks up 2-1. You have the city of Edmonton ready to come after you gave back a shot to them. This is the fun we've been missing with playoff hockey, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I joked about it on our national video I do with Simmons and Garriock. Like, we've forgotten about how fun this is. There's just so much pent up energy. You can see why fans have been so good for home games in the arena. Like the amount of noise that is there is just a statement about the fact that this is a fan base, a city that has been desperate for this. And it is a reminder that at the end of the day, you hire right people, you empower them to do the job. You set a level expectation that they'll deliver. You let them try to deliver. You're going to do well instead of fiddling and meddling and underwhelming. So yeah, it's a great time to be here, and I think people are rightly puffing their chests out a little bit. No matter what happens, this is what they hope the Canucks would do. They hope the Canucks would at least win a round. And look, hey, no matter what happens, we're recording this Tuesday afternoon. No matter what happens Tuesday night, the Canucks are in this series, and they stand a very good chance of winning another round. But at the end of the day, this is what fans wanted. They wanted to see some playoff hockey, and they're seeing a bunch of playoff hockey, and they're having fun doing it.
On that point, do you feel a real rivalry is building? I mean, obviously, there's the geographical thing, Calgary, sure. Edmonton, whatever.
Yeah.
But that rivalry and the hatred was born because they were two very good teams competing for the cup. And I would say the same thing with the Blackhawks and the Bruins. The Bruins one probably a little more everlasting, but the Canucks lost to the Rangers and they lost to the Islanders in the Stanley Cup, and there was a little bit there, but that wasn't. No one cares about the Islanders now. Yeah. But do you feel with the animosity between the sort of the fan base, I'm not going to say animosity amongst the media. I'm referring, of course, to this piece that Patrick wrote. If you haven't read it, go read it. In response to a piece that was written by Mark Spector of Sportsnet, basically accusing Vancouver fans of being paranoid, delusional, and quit whining about the refs. Well, and Patrick offered an excellent riposte. But do you feel that this is the birth of a rivalry, that it's at least going to last while the Canucks are good and the Oilers are kind of good?
Yeah, that's the sustainability thing, right? Like, you play each other as much as the Canucks and the Oilers now have. And obviously, they 3 games in the beginning of the year that I think are really a different team. A team that wasn't playing very well, had kind of lost its way. Now, obviously, righted their way. Even that game that the Canucks won late in the regular season, no Connor McDavid. But we've seen in this playoffs, obviously, the temperature rise. And part of it is just the Canucks having, Nikita Zadorov stirring the pot endlessly. But the Oilers have guys that do that as well. I mean, Connor McDavid, to his credit, plays hard, and he doesn't back down, right? Like, that's part of this too. He's a guy that does get in the mix. He does stand up. The Canucks have been playing an emotional, even if it's been a hard checking, conservative style, they have emotional players. We've seen the excitement of Brock Besser. The passion that is in JT Miller. And of course, like I said, Zadorov. So yeah, there's huge potential here for sure. It's all how things play out going forward. I mean, obviously, at least 2 more games in this series. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the distance. There's a lot of passion, a lot of energy in this series, and yeah, you've got the fan bases going at each other now too. I mean, not just on social media, but the overall, just the whole thing to it is exactly what people want, and there's every reason to think it can be sustainable.
When I look at these two teams, obviously Edmonton, ever since they've had McDavid and then Draisaitl came along, the narrative on them is, okay, they're great offensively, but they struggle defensively. When we know the Canucks were in that position for a long time as well. But something that I believe you wrote, I've read so much of it from all you guys. People go check it out, theprovince.com. Sign up for Canucks Report email. You'll get everything delivered to your inbox every day that we do. But there was a piece that was talking about literally Ian Clark's role in developing goaltenders. Mm-hmm. And, it doesn't always come through. They haven't all been home runs, but to have Demko while he's injured, and then, they went out and spent money on DeSmith, and that's fine. But to see a kid like Silovs come in this position and do what he does, and then I look at Edmonton, which has been crying out for a goalie for 5-6 years.
Yeah.
I look at Toronto, which has been crying out for a goalie for 5 or 6 years. I remember even going back to Luongo, his contract was an issue in that, but I remember also at that time the conversation was the market for goalies is low. You won't get first-round picks back for goalies. And I'm looking at this and going like, why? Because if I look at Edmonton and Toronto and say if they had Vancouver's goaltending coach and their prospects, they're probably talking about being at least getting to the Stanley Cup a couple of times. Why do other teams not seem to be able to fix that Achilles heel? And Edmonton are certainly one of them.
Yeah, I mean, Edmonton in many ways are an outlier. Obviously, they've had a goaltending coach for a long time, but like I noted, over the past decade, the number of players that they produced, they let Devin Dubnyk go for never any clear reason why, because he went and had obviously was having a down season, but found his way back and was one of the top goalies in the game for a long time. But really, it's Laurent Brossoit, who's a solid backup in Winnipeg, and Stuart Skinner, and that's it. And this is a question I've been asking for a long time, because goaltending in Edmonton has always been a story. Why are their goalies better? Why are they always let down by this? And over the years, you talk to people around, and they're just saying, in the end, it's about where you put your focus and where you put your money. And the Canucks have done that, whether it's Ian Clark, as it has been for 6 years now, and he was there before, obviously 15 years ago, or Rolly Melanson in between, or even Dan Cloutier for a couple of seasons. And Cloutier was considered to be doing a pretty stand-up job. Like this is something they've worked on. They've been focused on building not just the guy that you have right now, but thinking far, 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 far ahead. And Artus Silovs, he's the man of the moment. And he's a guy that they want to think is going to have more games in him. I don't know if necessarily as a starter. Thatcher Demko's their guy, but it's a focus. It's an area of focus they've had, not just scouting, but also in development. And that's our storyline right now. I mean, the Oilers have obviously done a lot with their power play. And that power play is such a weapon, but it is undermined by the fact that they don't get good enough goaltending. Stuart Skinner of the 20 of the goalies who have played playoff games since the beginning of the salary cap, so 2005. So the 2006 Stanley Cup playoffs onwards, of goalies who played, I think, at least 15 games. He has the worst save percentage in the entire pool of goalies, which is something like 70 goalies. He's just not been good enough. He might be a capable backup, but he's just not been good enough in that starter's role, and the Oilers are where they are partly because of that.
I saw a similar stat that said he was the second worst playoff save percentage, and the only person worse than him was Dan Cloutier.
Okay, then that's it's in that realm. Like I think that was back to 2000. Yeah. But the point is that he's been terrible, and he's been astounding. But there was the Cloutier one. I couldn't remember who was first and who was second.
No, but the funny thing about that is when you look at that 2005 era Canucks team, if they get decent goaltending, they probably win a cup, at least one. And so then now, again, I look at Edmonton and I look at Toronto and these teams that repeatedly fail in the playoffs, and it's the same thing that lets them down more often than not. And I just, I find that fascinating in this series, that the Canucks are where they are with their, as you said, Demko, their number one starters, played one game in the playoffs. Like this, it's kind of ridiculous that against that offense that you have that luxury of having a backup who plays that way, and these other teams continually can't get over the hump.
And it's a story about what Rick Tocchet has been able, and Adam Foote and Sergei Gonchar have been able to bring this team by bringing this defensive focus to the game, that they give their goalie, no matter who it is, a chance to play, right? Like Thatcher Demko had a terrible start to 22-23, and it was partly because the defense in front of him under Bruce Boudreau was a total disaster. And he didn't have a chance. You give a goalie a chance to make a save, and they're going to do stuff. And that is the other part of the story. You look at the Edmonton, the struggles that they've had in front of him. The top pairing, Bouchard and Ekholm have been very good, but because they play with McDavid all the time. Cody Ceci and Darnell Nurse, their second pairing, are a disaster. Like the number of shots they give up every shift is wild. And the amazing thing on top of that, like it's league worst in the playoffs anyway. The wild thing on top of that is that they haven't been getting the goaltending and they haven't been getting the goals. So what we would call they're getting PDO'd. Like they are actually getting hurt, but it's even worse it's bad enough the way they're playing, and it's even worse given the goaltending. And so you add that up, and that's just a disaster. I mean, when McDavid and Draisaitl are on the ice, the Oilers are great. They haven't scored enough at 5-on-5, or perhaps haven't produced enough at 5-on-5 the way you want, but they're great otherwise. The rest of the team has been a disaster. And the Canucks have taken advantage of that. They have been able. They're not a flashy, exciting depth team, but they have enough depth and enough hard work. They've been able to win. They've been able to win that battle. And on top of that, they're getting better goaltending, and they're getting good big performances from the likes of Miller and Hughes and Besser, and their power play has done enough. It's been a fascinating series to date, and like I said, I don't think we're going to be. I think we're going to be talking about this one for a long time.
Do you think it goes 7?
It could. I mean, listen, Calvin Pickard, we'll see. I mean, people probably watch this video after Calvin Pickard's game in Game 4. It's a huge task for this guy, no matter what happens. And he's only played 5 playoff games in his professional career. He's had a pretty long AHL career for the most part. He's been in the NHL, up and down. This is his first.
32 years old. Yeah,
this is his first playoff start in the NHL. He's only made 5 playoff starts as a professional. Like, he is what he is. In the end, that's a guy who is in the role he's in because of he's just not as good as the other guys. And to compare, I think Jim Matheson said, to compare. Well, what about Artus Silovs? He's the. I'm like, this is a completely different story. One, Edmonton's defense is terrible, and two, this is a young guy who has huge potential in front of him versus a guy who we know what he is, and that is not a number one and anything close to a number one goalie in the NHL, and probably barely a number 2.
What are the keys for the Canucks the rest of the series, do you think, if they're going to take? I mean, obviously, if you win this, you've got stranglehold. But even so, you come home.
No matter what, to win the series, it comes down to playing defense, and it comes down to, again, trying to stay out of the box. I mean, obviously, they got a couple late penalty kills on the PK in Game 3 that were huge, but you're just playing with fire with that power play. It is so strong and so powerful that at the end of the day, the Canucks, they need to play their smart defensive game. And Rick Tocchet has talked about it, and it happened again. They can't panic. They've panicked a little bit in the third periods, the last 2 games, as the Oilers have come heavy and hard at them. They need to have a little more patience in moving the puck, not just flipping the puck out, constantly accepting pressure. They need to take the puck down the other end of the ice. In the long run, you can't just think you're going to absorb blow after blow, night after night. Like we're now in that kind of test of endurance part of the series too. They're playing every other night. Obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl playing half of the game in Game 3 is going to have some impacts going forward. I mean, in Game 4, if they have to play a ton, and it sounds like they're going to play a ton because both of them are split up, and they're essentially, you're going to think they're going to play each of them half the game again. Like, that's going to wear out. That's going to add up, and they're going to wear down. They're both obviously as good as it gets, and so they can manage that for a while. But this is a series that the Canucks are going to have to keep working if they're going to have any success.
Who's been the most surprising player for you in the playoffs so far?
In Vancouver?
Yeah.
Or in the series?
No, I mean
for the Canucks,
you covered this team all year, and to me, there are a couple of guys that stand out in the playoffs going,
Well, Elias Ekholm, Matthias Ekholm, Elias Lindholm finding his way is a fantastic story. Like, this is why they picked this guy up. They knew that this is a smart two-way player who's going to find a role, and he's finding it. He's now making a difference. And it's not just that he is centering the Canucks' best two-way pair of wingers in Dakota Joshua and Connor Garland. It's that he's able to be a contributor on the power play. And you look at the number of big faceoffs he's out there taking alongside JT Miller. Like, they're sending them out as a sort of let's win this faceoff and get the puck out kind of pairing. And it's worked. He's been a huge story. I mean, Nikita Zadorov obviously having 7 points in 9 games going into Tuesday. Also,
and being an aggravant and
aggravating and quotable, and just a guy that the Canucks should be putting out in front of the cameras every chance they have, because he knows what he's doing. He sets the tone. He creates conversation. And when in moments like this, obviously the Canucks, things are going well, but things might start going badly. And he's a guy that will distract from the overall narrative, and people will just keep. And he loves it. And of course, he's playing great. Got a bunch of goals, got some assists. obviously imposing himself physically. He's in Evander Kate's kitchen. He's been all over McDavid. You know, the role he has to play, he needs to keep sort of on that contained and focused, but keep playing that swashbuckling element he brings to the game. Is just so much fun. It's both those guys have been great additions, and you know, one of those moments where Vancouver can actually thank Calgary for their contributions.
Yeah, Zadorov again. It's sort of this classic. The way the temperature gets raised in the playoffs, you're playing the same guys every night. Yeah. So you just start to hammer them with the same stuff, and it has an impact. Sorry, you sort of in picking those players that you did, and they're all on my list too. And obviously, Silovs, he's getting a lot of it. Does Brock Besser get enough credit? Even, you know, I think he scored 40 goals this year, and And we're so obsessed, and I'm as guilty as anyone. We're so obsessed with talking about Pettersson and what's Pettersson doing. Is Pettersson happy? Is Pettersson giving death stares? Is he going to renew his contract? Is he injured? Is it? Yeah. And here's Besser constantly just turning that crank up, going back, delivering a little bit on what we saw in his rookie season, where looked like he was going to be just this great goal scorer. We all know why he's had dips and valleys, but here he is in the playoffs again, being the guy who just Edmonton can't stop.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. A guy who's had an incredible season. I mean, it's funny. We nominated him in Vancouver here for the Bill Masterson Trophy last year, just because of everything he'd gone through, and obviously was a mid-season potential trade candidate. He kind of found his way down the stretch. He was a remarkable story, and maybe we should have nominated him again because he's had such an incredible season. 40 goals, as you said, and the two-way game. I've always been a person who said I thought he was underrated for his two-way play, and it's come through in spades this year. I mean, part of the reason why I think JT Miller's had a resurgence as a two-way player is because of the way because the way he adds that sort of board element. He's a board battler, and Miller, you know, obviously P.S. Suter, I think, is part of the story, but Miller's got down to the mistakes, and a lot of this too is learning how to play this talk-it breakout system and understanding where to be. And Brock Besser is one of the smartest players going out there. You just see the angles he takes. He's never been the fastest skater, but he's never last in the race. He plays a smart game. He gets to the puck, and he's been a great story. And you're absolutely right to want to highlight him.
We won't go into it now because I know you're busy. You have to go, and plus it's a little premature. So they're only up 2-1. But I'm looking at Dallas being up 3-1 and thinking, Ghilardi versus Aquilini, like real beef, ultra wealthy Vancouver families, court issues, the ownership around the Canucks going, but honestly, to have that with the winner going to the Stanley Cup, like there are times with owners, you know, they're involved, but it's a toy for them mostly, right? Yeah. This is personal. This will be personal if we get these two in the conference final. That would be fun.
We'll see. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll wait a little long. So quickly, how's this going to finish?
I think the Canucks are going to win this in 6. I think they'll be. Well, it's funny. It wouldn't be out of the realm to think they're going to win Game 3 here. You come back for Game 5, you know they'll want to win it. They don't want a repeat of that Nashville series. But Edmonton's just so there's so much at the top end. Maybe it even goes 7. I think we're certainly going to have hockey this weekend. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Canucks in 6 is the way I'd look at it too. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks to everyone for watching, listening, reading, everything that you do. So again, sign up for the Canuck Report. The print edition has its own issues that some people are just figuring out. I know there's the posters, but all the content we do, including the video, delivered right to you if you sign up for the Canuck Report at theprovince.com. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Patrick. And we will talk to you probably in a couple of days.